Hello, welcome everybody. We are beginning the debate now on European rights, the talk about LGBT rights in Europe under pressure right now. We have European activists with us today that we are so excited to have here because they're going to tell us a bit about what's going on in countries such as Slovenia, Poland, Denmark. Later on, perhaps we're also going to have a visit from our Greek friend who's also going to join us, who's also an activist who's here at the Pride today. My name is Lea Fridberg. I work in Nyt Europa, that is cooperating with European Public Sphere about this dome here at the Danish Pride. We are so excited to have you here today. In Nyt Europa we work a lot with fundamental rights, European values, especially about the civil society and activist conditions right now, in a time where we see democratic backlash and attack on our European values in general. Today we're going to talk a bit about, of course, LGBT rights. We're going to have some conversation about what's going on in your respective countries, but we're also going to have a broader conversation about European values and the pressure that is happening right now on some values we might have taken for granted for a very long time. To start off this conversation, to start off this talk, I want to invite our partner from the European Public Sphere, and Harp, to talk a bit about why we're here today in this democracy dome that you might have noticed. What is going on? Why are we here in this bubble? Where has it been? Where is it traveling? Where is it going? Why are we doing this? So Anne, perhaps you can help me explain this. And also I know you're going to talk about the Schuman Declaration. I would love to hear about that. So thank you.
Yeah. So just a very quick introduction to our organization, Democracy International. We're an organization based in Cologne, an NGO, and work towards more citizen participation and direct democracy in general. And in 2017 we started this DOME project, the European Public Sphere. And basically the idea is to travel to public spaces, public places in Europe, and invite everybody who's just randomly passing by, and also invited speakers, to come together and talk about issues that concern the future of Europe, and to really, spark this process of collecting ideas in the public sphere, trying to help citizens to get active, and connecting these ideas and EU policymakers. This year we're on a very special tour. It's our Remember. Thanks. Now it's back. So this year we're on a very special tour, which is also co-funded by Europe for Citizens. Ben, kannst du es ein bisschen höher machen? Yeah, which is also co-funded by the Europe for Citizens program of the European Union, and it's called Remember Tour because we're visiting 6 places of remembrance in 6 different EU countries. This is our 4th stop after the Border Museum Schifflersgrund at the former inner German border, after University Square in Bucharest, after the Expo Flora in Burgas. Yeah, 4th stop, and after this we're going to Warsaw and to Prague. And the idea is that, inspired by the past, we'll talk about the future of Europe. So we're very, very excited to be here and to hear more from you. And the occasion that we're actually celebrating with this tour is 70 years of the Schuman Declaration, which French Foreign Minister Robert Schuman held on the 9th of May in 1950, so only 5 years after the end of World War II, and in which he proposed to have a community for steel and coal, which later developed into the European Union. So a very important date to remember, and a date, or the date on which we celebrate Europe Day every year. That's it from my side.
Thank you, Anne. Thank you so much. And the reason why we also want to talk about remembrance here at the Dome is because here in New Europe we also worked a lot about European history, remembrance, learning from the history in Europe. We work on a project called History of Optimism, where we try to see what happened in the time between the fall of the Berlin Wall, and of course it wasn't just centered in Berlin. There was definitely a development in a lot of places in Europe, in countries such as Poland. other places, where democracy really came forward and was a value that was fought for by civil society. But from the fall of the wall until the Eastern enlargement in 2004, where we welcomed a lot of new countries into a European fellowship, some lessons might have been lost from that time. What we have been trying to discover is what role does civil society play in ensuring democracy, ensuring democratic value, and of course in ensuring minority rights, and what happens when we sometimes forget about the bottom-up democracy. And to facilitate this discussion, we are so blessed to have with us a really amazing panel today. Censorship comes in many forms. So we have a lot of great activists with us here today. And take it from the top, we have Marek Azoulay, who is a Danish activist who is active in Mino Denmark, working with minority rights, who is also active in a lot of different communities, including our own here in New Europe. We also have some new activists. I would like to ask you to introduce yourself as well, because I think you know much better what you do than I do. And also because I want to hear more about what organizations do you come from, and what is the primarily issues that you're working with right now in your different countries. We start off here with you, Julia.
Hi everyone, my name is Julia Kata. I'm managing the Transfuzia Foundation, which is one of 2 transgender organizations in the country, in Poland. Thank you so much for having me. It's a great pleasure and honor. As we are one of 2 organizations, we basically do everything. Our core activities are support activities. We provide support groups, psychological counseling, both for the trans community, but also for their families, their close ones across the country. We provide legal help because Poland is the country which doesn't have legal gender recognition law. And I think we're one of very few countries in the world right now in this situation. We do a lot of research. We try to do a lot of educational activities like trainings, workshops, especially for the healthcare providers community, because the knowledge is not there. And we don't have a national protocol for transgender patients and clients. So we try to do as much as we can, basically, with very limited resources, unfortunately.
Thank you. And do you want to introduce yourself as well?
Sure. Yeah. Hi, my name is Lana Gobec. I'm from Ljubljana, Slovenia, and I'm the president of Legibitra, which is the largest LGBTI NGO in Slovenia. We were established more than 20 years ago, and through years we basically evolved into different programs. Now one of our biggest areas actually is HIV and STD testing, community-based testing for men who have sex with men. We also offer support for people living with HIV and fighting stigma and discrimination of people who live with HIV. Another important cornerstone of our work is, of course, youth. We are a youth center. We cooperate really well here with municipality of Ljubljana and with other youth centers also that are more territorial based, not just not like us who are more primarily LGBTI youth center. And it's really an interesting way of cooperation also with some NGOs that maybe in other contexts we are not so closely connected. For instance, really church connected youth centers and everything, and so it's a really important area for us also to build bridges basically. Here also we also provide psychological supports mostly for LGBTI people who turn to us with any kind of problems, but also for parents. This has been quite increasing now lately, that the parents actually call if children came out and are then interested what they can do to support them. But one of our really most important pillars is our advocacy work. We were active since the establishment on In past, it was a lot of fighting for marriage equality, of course. Now for joint adoption, and also the field that we are really active on now are legal gender recognition based on self-determination, and also intersex and unnecessary basically surgeries that happening around this. So while also providing legal services, legal support to people who turn to us, maybe in short.
So a wide range of achievements, but also still work that progress you need to see happening. Yes. Now we're gonna have a talk today also with you as activists, what drives you as activists and the issues that you see right now for being an activist as well in your countries. And Marek, I want to go back to you also hear a bit about more your work. You work in Denmark as a youth activist in the EU area. And can you tell us a bit about why do you think it's relevant for young people to be engaged in the question about EU especially?
I think that it is because that the EU is something that we are not taught a lot about in schools and don't know very much about in general. It's not like it makes the headlines and discussions among young people, even though it's somewhere that we can make changes that affects the whole continent and the member countries. And when we travel, we are granted a lot of opportunities, and we have rights that we might take for granted because we're used to freedom when traveling. And maybe also if you plan a gap year, you want to work in another member country, and you can do Erasmus exchanges and so on. But on the more serious note, then we have some global struggles and issues that we want to face and demand solutions on. It could be climate, it could be anti-racism, it could be LGBTQ plus rights, human rights, to ensure peace on the borders to Europe and other continents. The EU is the biggest donor of humanitarian aid in the world. So there is really something where we can achieve a lot if we manage to gather and mobilize more young people in the debate on the European level. Because I believe that it's somewhere we really can move a lot.
Thank you. And if you go back to of course what's happening right now in Poland, I think it's also very interesting that talking about the EU and what's happening in different membership countries, I think a lot of us heard about the fight for abortion rights in Poland right now. Some of you may recognize the flag Strajkowiec. That's also the symbol of the women's movements in Poland fighting for rights. But we also see sometimes in this demonstration where hundreds of thousands of people are demonstrating in the streets, a lot of them are carrying the European Union's flag, a blue flag, yellow stars. Do you know why people start to carry this flag? Do you know what perhaps it represents the European values in those debates about the rights of the women and perhaps the minoritized people?
Well, I think people started to realize how privileged we are to be a member state of European Union, and our government is, for many years now, they're building this rhetoric that European Union is actually harmful for Poland, that European Union is taking our history, the way we were, and that basically the European Union is a threat. So a lot of people are disagreeing, especially those who are in their 30s or 40s, who remember that not so long ago it was not so easy, for instance, to travel. That was not so easy to start working somewhere abroad, because I remember when I was a teenager and to enter UK as a school trip, I had to have my passport. I had to receive visa on the border and so on and so on. So people are feeling that those privileges we are getting because we are a member state, they might be taken away from us, and people have enough. the protests, well, probably what you saw on the TV a few months ago, that was not the first strike or demonstration. They happened a few years ago because back then it was already proposed the law not only banning the abortion, but they also planned that if women, because of course they only see straight women can be pregnant and might need abortion. If you're a taxi driver who will take a woman to the clinic, this taxi driver would be also persecuted for doing that. So after the backlash and after the first black protest back then, they froze the law because they were scared that if they pass this law, they will not be in charge of this country anymore. So when it started back last year, I think people had enough because the situation in Poland is really bad. The situation in the legal system, when they doing whatever they want, like the Minister of Justice is also Prosecutor General. This is the same person. So that's like, you know, power in one person, and he can do whatever he wants. Like, and he's a person who's suing the doctors who he thinks killed his father for 13 years now. And when he started to lose the battles, he started to run over the wife of the doctor. So he's really difficult. All the government is difficult, but I think people have enough, and they are seeing what we can lose, and people absolutely are aware that all of you know what's going on in Poland, because our government saying like, Europe don't care, nobody knows what's happening here. Like, nobody will help us, and you know, we can do whatever we want. And the only threat they have, and the only thing that they're scared of, that the funds will be cut off. They don't care about the human rights. They don't care about the situation. They don't care about youth ones, because Polish psychiatry for children is basically dead. Like, there are no doctors, there are no clinics, there's no support. Rate of suicidal attempts for the youth one is unbearable. And they don't care about those things. They just care about the money, because we're in the huge debts as a country. And if the European Union cuts the funds, they will probably lose the power.
Yeah, and now it taps into a really interesting debate about fundamental rights, but also rule of law. That has been a great debate in EU. What we have seen in Poland, of course, is also that the judicial system is being undermined by the political system. We see a lot of attacks on rule of law in general that has received a lot of backlash on European level. People start to look into if they can perhaps cut the funding, as you mentioned, as part of the European budget. But I actually think what is really interesting on the European debate is that we talk a lot about Hungary, we talk a lot about Poland, but as we talked about earlier, we don't hear much about Slovenia. Can you tell us about what's going on right now with Slovenia in terms of human rights, freedom rights, rule of law? What is the development that you see right now?
Yeah, so for quite some time, Slovenia has been seen as a really stable democracy. For those who may not know, Slovenia was part of Yugoslavia and gained independence in 1991. Afterwards, when we joined the EU together with, I think, 14 states at that time, and were the first to actually adopt euro. So we were like really evolved in democracy, in also entrepreneurship. We've been seen as a stable and an okay country. But what happened basically in recent years and lately, because Slovenia is currently presiding over European Union, has been also quite a lot in international media, is that throughout last decade maybe, our right party under the leadership of current Prime Minister basically was moving themselves not from right party to a really far right party. This was shown in rhetorics they used, especially during the refugee crisis, during also our fights for marriage equality at the referendums in 2012 and then in referendum 2015. But they were always seen more as a right, not so far right. They created these satellite parties, smaller, more radical parties that basically had more hateful rhetorics, more nationalistic rhetorics, more supremacy rhetorics, basically. And while doing that, they also, with huge support from Orban, they built their own media on local level, on national level, and are still and throughout the years they really managed to also get a lot of funds with really suspicious backgrounds with a lot of corruption. When the epidemics of COVID hit, actually a few days, basically one day after the epidemics was in Slovenia proclaimed, the government changed and the prime minister became the president of that far-right party. This is not his first presidency, this is his third time being a prime minister, but each and every year it is basically, with each time it is far more going towards the radical right side. And just as the epidemics with the, measures as do not allow public gatherings, limit social distancing. This was everything that really played well with them, because of course they started to there were no public gatherings allowed, no protests. A few months after the epidemics and after they took over, there was a huge corruption scandal with overpaying the medical equipment, with money going to basically their own companies or like through shell companies, like really this kind of transparent also corruption scandals. And people went out on streets. People knew that this government doesn't have a really good stance on human rights or respect of human rights, and it's also quite corruptive. But like what was happening, what started happening 1 year and a half ago, was like really all over the place and all out in the open. And afterwards, what they started to do is, and this is actually happening now, just today, the director of national TV was removed from her office to be replaced by someone else. So they are really now cutting the funds on one side to the civil society, and on the other side, they are now basically trying to take over the national media, because in Slovenia there is still part of the media that is that's not commercialized, that's not owned by private sector, and they are really hitting hard on those in these areas. As a LGBTI movement, directly we are not yet affected, like really that they would be targeting us as, for instance, they do in Hungary or in Poland or something like that. But the pressure on the civil society, cutting funds for cultural projects, cutting funds for environmental projects, really hard eligibility criteria in different governmental funds that are hard for NGOs that deal with human rights and minority to achieve, because it's not always quantity, it's also quality of what you do. And especially when you work with minority, you can it doesn't mean that you have huge numbers. So the pressure is coming here, and EU is, I think, quite concerned, but it always comes to this: what can be done and how to do.
Awareness raising also is first step when it comes to Slovenia. I heard this great story actually from the lockdown. Not a great story, because we talk about suppression of democracy rights, right? But I heard that when they restricted the rights for assembly and for peaceful demonstration, a lot of Slovenian activists responded in very creative ways. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Basically, it started it started with a call on Friday, put like the banners on balconies, on windows, or something like that. And then, because of epidemics, you need to social distance and everything. They started to do this cycling protests, where basically hundreds and thousands of people on every Friday afternoon in the evening would cycle around the parliament, around some streets. It was. And afterwards, when the COVID was a bit better and the restrictions were a bit lowered, people gathered. I think the biggest protest, and Slovenia has 2 million people, so Ljubljana 250,000. So the biggest protest actually had around 50,000 people, basically in the beginning of the summer in Ljubljana, closing main streets down completely. But while this was not allowed, they tried to find a way, especially with this cycling protest. So basically, it's now this known in Slovenia as a Friday cycling and cyclists.
That's very creative. But I also want to go back to talking about especially LGBT rights, because you were talking about LGBT people not directly being targeted right now, but maybe indirectly being hit by some of the consequences of the democratic backlash, by the attacks of rule of law. We talked about the women's movement being targeted. What's happening right now in Poland with regards to the LGBT rights? Are they also under pressure? Do you also face backlash?
Well, let's start with this, that LGBTI people don't have rights in Poland. There is no hate crime and hate speech legislation. We do have 3 penal codes for hate speech and basically hate crimes, but they don't have a premise of sexual orientation or gender identity and expression. The law proposals were proposed I don't know how many times. They were always rejected. We don't have equal partnerships. We don't have same-sex marriages. We don't have legal gender recognition. We have nothing, basically. The only legal protection for the community is actually labor law, because we had to implement it at some point. So it's kind of hard to say about the rights when you don't have equal rights, even though you're living in a country as a state of European Union. So the situation is very difficult because a few years ago, before the election, our government decided that the enemy of the state are the refugees during the crisis. And they were threatening people that the refugees will come and they will do horrible things. And we cannot, let them into Poland, which is absolutely unbearable for me because I live in a country with such a difficult history, and Polish people were running away from this country so many times because of so many reasons, the war, after war, and so on and so on. And we were expecting that other countries will accept us, they will help us. And now when we are able to support and help people, we are not doing this. And I believe it's like absolutely disgusting situation, and it shouldn't be like this. But after that, because we didn't accept any refugees during the crisis, this threat was just somewhere in the air. Like people didn't see the people coming, so it was kind of hard to threat with them. So before the last election, the government, the ruling party, decided that the new enemy of the state are the LGBTI people. And amount of hatred spread is absolutely unbelievable because, of course, our main political party, Prawo i Sprawiedliwość, they are close friends with the Catholic Church. And when you go to the church, you will hear that LGBTI people are pedophiles, they're rainbow plug, they should be prosecuted, they should be killed, and so on and so on. And this is not like one-time situation. It's like almost every Sunday, during the mass. So, and those, let's say, progressive churches or progressive priests are shut down. They're like not allowed to speak because it's anti the whole rhetorics. Of course, like political agitation is not allowed in the church, but in the practice, they're doing this and they're telling people who to vote for. So the campaign, both for the parliamentary elections and both the presidential ones, was in quite big part built on LGBTI hate. So the so-called president of Poland, he was officially in public saying that, LGBT people are not people, this is ideology. And we have to protect our children, we have to protect our families from the ideology. As a backlash of LGBTI plus card, which was introduced to Warsaw a few years ago, protecting rights of the LGBTI community in Warsaw, we became country which is officially in third part LGBT free zone. Like we're the free zone, like people, and they are always saying it's not people, it's ideology. And I'm always asking, like, why do you think my family is ideology? Like, can you look them in their faces and say you're not a human being? And when Minister of Education is saying LGBTI people are not people, they are subhumans, this is not okay. This is beyond everything that European Union stands for. And they are not prosecuted for that. There is no, consequences of those actions. They don't care about anyone. They just want to build their power and threat people. So we know there is a lot of hate crimes going on, but they are not reported because we don't have legal protection for them. So they can go to the police station, which police is, police was never, the biggest ally of any community probably. But right now, they're like I was never scared of police officer, even though I'm privileged to be cis, white, straight female. Now when I see the police officer, I don't know if he's not gonna beat me because he has this idea of beating me. Like people are scared. What we see for, over a year now, we see parents of transgender children sending them abroad because they are scared for their lives. It's not like it's difficult, okay, we're in Poland. They are scared that their children will lose their life. So this is how far we are from European values, from equality, simple respect of human being. And our grant donors are asking us for prognosis, like what do we see and what would we like to achieve in 2 years? And I cannot answer this question when the situation is changing every month. And the things are happening here, in Poland for the last 2 years. If you ask me about them 5 or 10 years ago, I would say we're, slowly but steady getting there. We're gonna be good country. We're gonna be place where every human being is equal, when you have your rights, you can be a happy person here. And now I stopped looking at the news, and you have to remember that the official Polish television is the only one which is available in the whole country. There are places in Poland when you cannot see anything else in the TV, and they can, for instance, make several reports or several news about LGBT people in a hateful way per day. So this is how much propaganda is spread around the country. They have radio as well. So those who don't watch television because they have enough, they will listen to the radio. And the free programs of the national radio are also theirs. So they will listen to the same thing. So... And now they're trying to cut off the TVN television, which is private television, American one. So they try to ban them from Poland. So
not great. Oh, no. So I think that everyone is welcome to ask questions throughout this conversation if you feel like it. In the end, we of course also gonna open up for questions to the panel right now. So please feel free to raise your hand or make a comment if you have one. I actually think that what is quite interesting about this conversation is that you're also talking about some trends spreading across European countries. I mean, you also talk about learning from countries such as Poland, Hungary, your country. The media is being suppressed, inspired perhaps about the tactics of different governments. Now, I want to ask you as activists working with minority rights, in very different EU countries, What do you think the role of civil society is? How can we show support? How can we show cross-national solidarity? And how can we perhaps cooperate about fighting this systemic democratic backlash that we are witnessing in the European countries? I know, Marek?
So, first of all, I just wanted to say that it's so painful to hear about this situation in our neighboring countries, because I believe that this is something that I would want so many more people to know about and hear the exact words from real people, not news articles or something that pops up in a Facebook post or something like this. We need the dialogue to be from like mouth to word of mouth, to go around to realize that it's actual struggles and it's just not on the other side of the country or something like that. It's not only in the reports. So in the civil society framework, I feel that what we need is real stories and to learn about each other in a way that also initiates motivation to demand change on behalf of others. So if our communities can help each other across the battles that we are facing and the struggles, because there's no question about that. For instance, here in Denmark, we are hosting WorldPride now, and there are a legal framework that enables to make the reports of hate crimes, but they don't trust the police, they don't feel recognized, and they don't report hate crimes. So there was a civil society movement called Live and Let Live, and it started out on Instagram. They built their own media platform to collect stories from real people. And their goal was to collect 1,000 stories because they knew that there were so many hate crimes here in Denmark not reported. And eventually they collected 1,000, and then they got attention by the media. They got attention by a few politicians, but finally the next goal was to collect 50,000 signatures online for the citizens' initiative to demand the parliament to take a new proposal for legislation. And they just achieved it this year. And now they got the prize for the WorldPride thing, and that is so cool. But I think that is one way to go. Communicating about real stories, real lives, and then I think other people they realize their privilege of being the majority. And that is one way of working, either with ethnic minorities, religious minorities, LGBT plus community, that in the end we're facing the same struggles. It's lack of fundamental human rights to live just one another with the same opportunities. Yeah.
So you're also talking a lot about awareness raising and putting a human face on the stories that we hear in the press, and we read about in reports as well. What about you guys? Do you have any recommendations for the global civil society, how to show solidarity with your work and how we can help with the struggle that you're facing?
I mean, yeah, definitely the awareness raising for us in Slovenia, because when we started talking, like 6 years ago, when we saw that Janša is building his own national media, that he's basically copy-pasting what Orban has done to gain power, when we started talking about it, was like, yeah, but Slovenia is fine, nothing's gonna happen there. Now we are at that point when we say, yeah, we told you so. But so yeah, awareness raising is for us quite important, because also our funding, because funding for advocacy is basically non-existent, and like 10 years ago, when looking at the field of human rights in Slovenia, not only LGBT rights but really wider human rights, most of the foreign foundations moved out. because Slovenia was fine, Slovenia was stable, and and that's why now for us it's good to see also that Europe is taking this seriously, because we see a lot of what the Prime Minister has been doing in media. He's been in, especially because of the presidency, there is a lot of attention here, and we see that the foreign foundations are returning. Luckily for us, because they see that this is a threat, and maybe what you spoke before, like especially about ideology and everything. This is the same thing is happening in Slovenia. This is not only a local thing. They are really well connected, like how this is going. And this is also for us really important to share the good practices between us, how to respond to this, because if anyone see the questions that will probably be on referendum in Hungary, it's like completely suggestive, and a lot of people would of course vote yes, we are not to, I don't know, teach LGBTI ideology, which means for them pedophilia in school. Yeah, of course, but this is suggestive. We have to fight this also in this rhetoric wise, how to address this, because it's also different to maybe campaign for human rights or for clean water. It's needed far more background, far more for people to understand what we are fighting for. Like you mentioned, stories are the ones that make then the difference. And it's harder maybe for people who do not have this kind of experience to connect and to realize why the fight here, why the standing up is, why the voting is important in some cases.
Yeah, I think what's really interesting about what you're saying is that people perhaps took for granted the democracy and the rights of a European country, and the second you kind of let go and you left the country, you saw the democratic backlash, you saw the loss of rights, you saw the minorities being suppressed in a higher degree. Yeah. And I think that's actually a key lesson for us to take with us, never to take for granted our rights we have. Yeah.
I think for Poland right now, as an activist, we are tired. We are extremely tired. Half of my friends is on sleeping pills or antidepressants because we cannot take it anymore. It's day after day. It's battle every day. You are not, you cannot predict what's gonna happen next day, because next day the bomb might drop, and you have to take care of this. All the organization that provide support, especially mental well-being and helps, are just drowned with work. Like at Transfusia, within a year, amount of consultations increased for over 150%. And our support coordinator was asking me, as a person who's managing the organization, like, do we have enough money? And I said, if we don't have enough money, I will dig it out from the ground. Because I'm psychologist as well, and I cannot see the situation when someone will be left behind without support. They cannot find anywhere else because we don't have fundings. And fundings in Poland is very difficult to get, because a lot of grants, I don't know, Lana, if it's the same in Slovenia, a lot of international grants are like European ones are like too big, like we cannot handle them. There are a few organizations which can manage those huge, amazing grants. For Transfusia, it's absolutely, we're a team of 4. Like, I'm not gonna make the 300,000 euros grant because we would not be able to make it. It's too big. And some grant donors are just avoiding Poland. So it's the same with Hungary and Bulgaria. Like, a lot of international grants are not available in those countries. So it's very difficult, to find money. For instance, Lambda Warszawa, who's making, again, with partnership with Transfusia, the LGBT intervention hostel, have to fundraise right now over 10,000 euros to make it work. And they're still lacking this money. And then they're fundraising it because, what will they do? They will not pay the rent or for the place, or they will not provide food for people who are there, or they will not provide services that they have to do. The money is not laying on the ground. So we definitely need your support. We need, deadly need your good words, because this is cultural thing. Polish people are not saying to each other nice thing, and really when we receive a message like, I do appreciate your work, thank you for doing this, that means a lot for us. If you're privileged enough to share your resources, like both on social media or you have few euros to spend, please donate this to organization in Poland, in Hungary, in Slovenia, because we really need this money. And it's not like we're gonna, go for the fancy trip on the, I don't know where, like to Denmark. We're gonna spend this money really well, and we are in the position we need this. So to make this work happen, because all the services, mental support, they're drowned because the public system doesn't work. It's not inclusive. It's for many places it's even not safe to go to psychologists as an LGBTI person. So I think that's the most important, and spread the news what's happening in Poland, because then our government will not be able to lie that nobody cares, nobody knows.
Learning a curve this week, even though I've been working with European politics for quite some time, and I know your fellow activist Marta Limpart from the Polish women's strikes also says she's tired. So it's really something echoes across the country, and it's just horrible to hear that. But one of my questions was actually also what you talked about, what else we can do, not only show solidarity between NGOs, but what we work with a bit in Denmark, at least, is that what we see after the EU enlargement, with funding especially, is that it's a lot of, especially Western European funding is canalized through the EU instead of bilaterally. So there's way less civil society projects going on between Denmark and Poland, Denmark, Slovenia, compared to maybe before. And we see that as a lack as well for understanding of what's going on in different countries. And that's also what we try to advocate for now in Denmark, at least, and also to say, yes, it's good that the EU also shows some muscles now, but the governments cannot hide that they should also show some muscles. So I just want to hear what we can do also to pressure our government to put pressure or to show solidarity to some extent to the work you do. Because sometimes they're like, yeah, it's the EU who does it. But then you also have the backlash of saying, okay, the EU puts some pressure, but then your government can say, oh, see what EU does. So there's all the conflict. So I think something that we can go back to is to find ways also to fund smaller projects, which is easier maybe bilaterally compared to through the EU. That's what we do in development aid. So can we learn from something? Is that something you think could be interesting? Is that, because I think when we talk to the government or politician, we need some more concrete examples on how it could be done. So it could just be interesting maybe also to continue that conversation, because that's something we see, especially what happened since the enlargement, which have maybe divided us more, because we don't know exactly what's going on because of the not directly project collaboration. Of course, the EU has a lot of good things there, but I agree it's large funding and it can be difficult to handle, and maybe you kind of need that more in between people funding as you can do at bilateral level. So that was just some thoughts.
Thank you so much for this comment. I think what's very helpful, first of all, I don't know, Lana, if you agree with me, what's needed is core funding grants. Because we have amazing ideas. We can do a lot of things, but if I have a team of 4, and one person is just for the financial and documentation letter, the other one is coordinating the support services, and there's 2 of us, me and our president, who can write the grants, reports, projects, so on. Our hands are basically tied, so we need core funding to have more people paid, because a lot of and I'm speaking for the position of the person who's paid for their work, and a lot of people are not paid, and they have to go to the work 8 hours, and then afterwards they can do the activism. It's also very draining. So we need core funding to, make it work, all of those. Of course, projects are extremely important, but without people, we cannot do them. And, it's difficult for me, like, to have person for a project of half a year and then say, like, sorry, I don't have the money for you anymore. Like, I have to let you go. That's really not fair for this person. What else? The embassies of few countries, they are providing small grants for NGOs. And that's actually very, very good grants, because as far as our grants and we managing them, the embassies are very supportive. They are very understanding that we might have a delay because there's another bomb dropped and we have to leave everything what we are doing and taking care of that. That means like we have to postpone the project for a month or something. And also they're like very, very easy to report, because I have some grant donors when I have to spend at least 2 weeks to make a report. And please don't feel I'm not appreciating them, but like, 2 people, because there's also a financial part, are like, dragged from the work for 2 weeks because we have to make a report. And those grants from the embassies, they're like super easy. So for us, it's just like, we're gonna do it. It's like, it's okay. And also we have amazing ambassador of Denmark in Poland. He's very supportive, and he's always remembering about us, the activists, and try to include us everywhere he can. So also that's the thing, like the embassies, they can do, this support, which is not very exposed, which I think, especially in Poland, is actually a good thing, because we're gonna do the stuff we have to do with your support, and there's not gonna be backlash on the media because the embassy gave the money to LGBT plug. So I think we cannot change the system right now, but we can smash it from the bottom, and I think this is actually the good thing to do.
Yeah, to add to that, I cannot agree more with core funding, because this is a huge problem when you have projects that are based really on content, and you can then hire basically people that deal with content. But we are not universities, we are not big governmental agencies that has a special department for accounting, a special department for project management, for gathering EU funds, and this is then divided between them. But in NGOs, we do everything basically. Yeah. Sadly, the funding is becoming is going more from core funding to project or program based instead the other way around. So maybe also one more practical thing of how could some organizations also from Denmark or somewhere help is inviting us for partnerships. Definitely partnerships that are open enough for us to bring our topics in, not that and support us through that. But when talking about EU funds, also the problem is that they are maximum 2 years. They always want something new, something innovative, something sustainable. I completely agree with everything, but sometimes you just need support services which are not innovative in a way. You cannot, discover some new method every 2 years and then pilot it and then everything. Sometimes you really need something to be more long term and more basically tackling people's needs.
Yeah, and I think that also the EU funds for youth is so difficult to achieve and to access. So that's something we discuss in the youth dialogue, making the funds from the EU more achievable for young people. So it's not so long reports and a difficult framework to fill in. And I would wish for them to also become more local and not necessarily demand many partners all around. Because at least what we learned in New Europe was that some of the activism could continue online during COVID. We had meetings with many different European organizations, and we want to continue this gathering and this network of young people taking care of each other's issues, helping each other locally. But in order to do so, it could be amazing if the EU could help us more in the local areas.
Thank you so much, and I think we're gonna take this with us. This is a great learning experience for us as well, and we're gonna bring this forward in our work, and hopefully also bring this forward to the European Union. That is also part of the plan with the Dome. I actually want to do something right now where we want to involve the rest of the Dome in the conversation, because this is of course a democracy Dome. The whole point is also to facilitate a discussion between the people who are in this and you, of course, as a panel. So what I want to do now is I want to ask you guys in the audience to take 1 minute to talk with your partner, talk with someone you don't normally talk to, about what's going on right now with LGBT rights, what's going on with minority rights, activism, democracy, and just hear your thoughts on the situation, and perhaps also what you would like to see happening going forward, maybe from your government, maybe how to support activists, maybe what the European Union could do. And then afterwards we will have a shared conversation about your thoughts on these matters. So we're going to take 1 minute. I hope you will join us in this conversation and go talk. So, is there anyone who want to share? Perhaps you guys, you had a conversation over here. What did you talk about connected to this debate? Do you want to?
I'm a little bit shy.
It's okay. You're among friends.
Okay.
You don't have to.
Well, I have been saying that the autocratic governments usually use the same tools: money and propaganda. Money to buy people, to buy voters, yeah, and propaganda like to take over of TV stations or something like that, yeah, TV channels. So the role of activists, I think, that they need that their voice should be better heard than the voice of the government. And the next thing is to because from my point of view, I see that sorry that it's maybe a little bit I would say harsh, that European Union sponsors the autocratic governments, sending the money. Yeah, if they don't cut off the money of the governments from the money. Yeah, it's like the European. It's like they are sponsors of the governments. Yeah, of the autocratic governments. So we should think about how to do some policy, yeah, which the money would be given only to these areas where government is not the owner, yeah.
Thank you. I think that's very interesting, and that also taps into the European Union's responsibility in regards to perhaps not supporting anti-democratic countries.
If, for example, we have a case of the Małopolskie voivodeship, yeah. It's something like maybe you would like to say something more about this. It's an interesting case, yeah.
Yeah. So the Małopolskie voivodeship, which is Lesser Poland and voivodeship, they have several this LGBT free zones, and yesterday they voted to help them. Like, because some very few of the places that become and call themselves LGBT free zone, they lost their fundings from EU, and they reject the law because the money. they didn't care about the people. It was the money they were losing. Some Polish activists are already sued for, making this public, and those places are saying the activists are to blame that they lost the fundings, not the situation, not what they are doing. And most of those people who are in favor of this LGBTI free zones, they cannot even, say what LGBTI stands for, because there were a few interviews and they were like, I don't know what is it. So yesterday they voted to held the LGBTI free zones. So probably they will lose the fundings as well. So it takes the hope, but of course those those rulings are unconstitutional. They have no legal basis, and so on and so on. But still, they are doing this, and of course, they are saying it's not about the people; it's about the ideology. So yeah.
And I also think so that the EU was way too slow on reacting on this. The mechanism when the human rights are violated in member countries, that should not be a question for discussion. That is just straight cut the money, because follow the money, then you follow the power, right? So I think that they were way too slow reacting. And then next, what I felt like was missing also just member states in the national parliament standing up and reacting on the behalf of other countries, our neighbor countries. So I would want like our foreign ministers around Europe to react on foreign affairs, because it's not the whole world only, it's also just our neighbor countries. And the EU, it does react to it, and now they have cut the funding, but why wait so long? Because this will continue. The fight is not over at all.
I just have also a question around funding and sanctions, and I would like to hear, especially with the situation, of course, in Poland, is sanctions and this approach the best way? Because there's also a discussion. Do you think that it will, if it's like state funding, if it's the overall budget, the whole budget from the EU is taken from Poland, do you think that the government will follow as quick as the municipality, or would it also have a negative backlash on other parts of society as well, because it's such a huge funding and it's a lot of, so it's not always one-sided to say sanctions and the cutted funding, and what other means can be done to put pressure, or again to grow the pressure from below, of course, funding and all that directly to activists. But sometimes it's also maybe the easy way to say sanctions, but can we, which I completely support, it's not that, but it's just a little not black and white in that way.
Of course, it's not black and white, but we're under Article 7, which is a serious threat for democracy for years now, and nothing happened. So if the EU will postpone this longer, it's not going to be any threat, because how many years is now? Like 7, 5? And nothing happened. So, of course, our government, like if EU start doing the sanctions, they will cut off the fundings. They will try to pretend for some time, but then the money is done. Of course, they were gonna blame on everybody else, not themselves. Of course, it's gonna affect whole society, but at the other hand, it will open people's eyes, because there's not gonna be Erasmus anymore. There's not gonna be new road. There's not gonna be any new trams in the cities. There is not gonna be this and that and that. And then people will be like, because, as I said before, like people are taking a lot of things for granted, and you can see like how cities, small towns, villages are changing because of the EU funds. And they are taking this for granted. Like, okay, we have to have like 20% of the money, and then we're good. We're going to receive the money. We're going to do this, this, and this. And when the grants were like cut off, there's not going to be anything else. And then maybe people will get pissed and they will start acting and saying like, okay, I have enough, our government is not doing anything, or they're doing harmful thing. Because like when they voted against Tusk, and Poland was the only country which voted against. Our prime minister back then, when she was coming back to Poland, she had, orchestra on the airport, flowers, children, everything, like full, event. And media congratulate her because she made a huge success. And we were like 27-1, But, they showed this, like, that was really good success, because some of the politicians of Prawo and Sprawiedliwość deeply believe that we should have death sentence because of Donald Tusk. And especially for him, there should be, like, death penalty. Yeah, and they're, like, Catholic right-wing party. So like, this is the time that you have to cut those fundings, because if you're going to thread another year, nothing's going to change. And Poland is like in a very difficult situation money-wise. So they would not be able to blur people with like 13 or 14 right now retirement pension. They will not give the children support, which doesn't go directly to the children most of the time. So there's not going to be money they can spread around people so they can buy them votes, because people are saying, okay, we know they're doing bad things, but they're giving us money, real money. Like, I receive money for my children every month. I'm going to vote for them. But if they don't have money, they cannot give it us. So then people will start seeing like, what the hell is going on in here? So it's really the time to do that. Like, it's harmful decision, and it's not a win-win situation. Like, everybody will lose, but this is the only thing you can do.
Yeah. Do you want something? Right. Thank you. I think that's really interesting, also because that's a conversation we have a lot in Europe. Is the fiscal response that we have to Poland, to perhaps Slovenia in the future, to Hungary now? Is that the tool we have? So I think it's really interesting to hear from you what you think is going to happen when we do that, or if we're going to do that. Okay. So I think, do you have something you want to contribute? Something you talked about that you want to share? Yeah?
Just, I think we talked about the same thing to begin with, the fiscal response. We looked at it from a different angle, because when you said, yes, there will be consequences, and this is 7 years on, but what you're basically starting is hatred against the EU, which your politicians are already talking about. And most likely this will, when you basically remove the remaining funding, or I guess, I don't know how big the EU budget represents from your national budget, but it will obviously be detrimental, much bigger impact in the rural areas, and I believe that's also where you have the most people who are against LGBT. It's just, I guess, but what we discussed was, are there other options? Because you don't want to end in some civil war, or, I mean, the EU does not want to have that in the midst of so many other important agendas like climate and stuff. Like Poland is one of the main CO2 emitters, right? So we need to work with Poland to reduce emissions. So what we talked about was, how about having Polish EU ways to report. So you mentioned in the beginning that people are afraid of reporting to the police and do it through Instagram or self-driven initiatives. Shouldn't the EU have like a not global, but EU-wide way to report crimes, hate crimes, and this kind of things? And we're not familiar with the new EU strategy on, I guess it's diversity or inclusion or some topics like this. But what I hear is that it's not sufficient. So maybe this could be one of the things that the Commission can do without the EU Council's approval, to just, require that there is a tool, they can fund this kind of initiatives. And the other thing was media. we don't. I mean, we watch so much Hollywood media all the time. Why don't we have EU media that can kind of, you know, take these topics up and create awareness around LGBT and, you know, any minority or any challenged group that is fighting or is active. So those were some of the ideas.
Thank you. That was really interesting. I think perhaps Marek, you also talked earlier about culture as a way to enhance cohesion in European Union, and perhaps one really specific point was perhaps should the EU have a reporting system for hate crimes, just as Liv og Liv, but in the system officially.
It would be amazing to scale up the national initiative here in Denmark to make a European one, because also I think it could connect the civil society across the borders to do a joint fight. And remember that when an attack on fundamental rights in Poland and Hungary and Slovenia is also an attack on those rights here in Denmark or Sweden or Germany. So we are in it together, and I think that one way in doing it is to work across borders and have a conversation like this maybe next year, if not earlier on, because meeting in person is also important, and understanding each other's battles and struggles, discussing strategies for solutions, and what we can do today and what we would want to do in a couple of years with the EU supporting us.
Do we have some comments from you guys? Perhaps some short comments also on this conversation about is there other ways than perhaps the fiscal response? Do we risk some solidarity? Do we risk some internal EU conflicts if we attacks too hard, perhaps with punishment in response to this democratic backlash? What do you think about this?
Yeah, the fear definitely is out there, you know. If you take only the money away, then basically people will start blaming the EU. The hatred towards EU will rise. I do agree that this is also out there, but on one hand, maybe this can be solved is to, especially in cases we now have a mechanism of rule of law reporting and rule of law reports that basically current Commission President put as some kind of a budgeting thing also to check if the states are okay on the field of human rights, on the field of rule of law. And maybe a way of thinking would also then be, to take it maybe from the governments, some parts of it, and maybe to turn it toward the civil society, especially in places where freedom of media, where civil society needs a boost, because the democracy is at stake. Not in general maybe, but especially after that, based on the rule of law reports and everything, also could be a way forward.
So the rule of law report, this new tool for European Union, when you monitor breaches to the rule of law in each given membership countries, also often with civil society as the organization actually monitoring and criticizing the government. And using that more directly to cut funding, to criticize.
To give it to the civil society in a way, to transfer it there, because the money is needed. I agree that the money is needed, and how better to basically challenge and oppose the government than to strengthen the voice of the civil society.
That's a great finishing comment. That's good. Do you have some final comments?
Yeah, I think if those things were that easy, we would not be 7 years under Article 7. So I wish I would live it in the perfect world, but we were not. And of course, there's going to be a backlash. We're aware of that, but we're in the position that people are taking their own lives. And this is time to act sharply, because we don't have a time, for another 10,000 years conversation about something. This time is done. Like, there's no space for, pushing this way and another, unfortunately. But yeah, I do believe like people should talk. There should be different mechanisms. There should be different things to do. But I think the time just pass, and what we can do is react. And we have to react, like all of us, like making statements, our own personal statements that you disagree what's happening in I don't know, in Poland, in Hungary, in Slovakia, in many places, because like activism is like, it's not a huge thing as people commonly think. Activism is reporting hate speech on Facebook, hateful comment. This is activism. You don't have to do, you know, huge speech on, I don't know, a Council of Europe assembly. You can report the things on Facebook. You can show solidarity with the minority group on a special occasion or day, or just without any, you know, special occasion. That's activism. And this is something we all can do, basically. And I really encourage you to do those kind of things. And then the world will be a little bit less harmful place for others.
I want to clap. No, but I couldn't agree more. And I also think it should start out with a question often, and being humble, asking questions, being curious about how the everyday situation is about for your neighbors, or just across the border, neighboring country here in Europe. Because what we can achieve together is so beautiful, and I think that it's the way forward, collaborating, but also more understanding and taking your time to just ask questions.
I think that's a beautiful way to end this conversation tonight. Thank you so much for everyone who has participated here today. Thank you so much to our wonderful panel. We definitely appreciate your work, and I think we should give them a big round of applause. Thank you so much, and I want to thank you, our partner, European Public Sphere, for bringing this dome to host us here tonight. You're welcome to check out some of the more materials we have here, information materials, and of course to take a muffin. So thank you very much.